Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Wings Podcast. This is your host Milind Agnihotri. On today's show we will meet Diveakssh Schae, who calls himself an audio nomad and the forests of Dandeli in Karnataka as one of his homes. This nomad has been making music from beautiful places amidst nature. First, from a camper van in Australia, which he converted into a mobile music studio and home, and now while backpacking across India. The result is his debut album Moments of Clarity, which features songs about the awakening that inspired his leap of faith. For me, there is a conscious questioning of tradition happening right now, he says. Welcome Diveakssh to this episode of Wings Podcast.
Hey Milind, thank you so much for having me and that really kind intro. It's so nice to be on your podcast.
Thank you so much. And as a fellow podcaster, first let me ask you, you heard a few episodes of Wing Podcast and you've been gracious enough to agree to come as a guest on this show. Just as a quick one, how do you find our podcast?
Mate, it's really awesome, and I'm kicking myself for not have got onto it earlier. So to everyone listening, how I got onto this podcast is a common friend of ours called Anushka, who I met at the BHX project, a creative residency in Ladakh that I attended. And she got onto the podcast and she put my name forward very kindly. Thank you, Anushka. And so I went ahead and listened. One episode I heard was the episode with Karan Pandav, another fellow musician. And it was excellent, just the way you guys, spoke about deeper things such as what is music, what is a good song, and also kept it lighthearted. So well done to the two of you for figuring out the storytelling and tech of podcasting and getting it to the finish line.
Thank you so much. So nice of you to say this. Diveakssh, you call yourself an audio nomad. Now, this is a phrase, to be very honest, I've heard for the first time. I mean, the word audio is familiar, the word nomad is equally familiar. And in some ways, I resonate with the word nomad because I find myself to be one too. But would love to know, how did young Diveakssh discover himself to be a nomad? And how did this audio nomad thing happen to you?
That's a really good question, Milind. So what I'm going to do today is a little bit unconventional, right? I'm going to answer this question of yours. I'm going to share my story of how I got to nomadism. And what I'm going to do is, while sharing the story, I'm actually going to share pieces of sound that I've either recorded or created myself to tell the story. So it's an experiment. I've never done this before. Feel free to stop me at any time and ask me more clarifying questions. But is that okay if we go on a little journey through my childhood?
Absolutely. Whatever works for you, and love to hear the accompanying sounds that has happened to the nomad as he kind of went on living his life. Go ahead, all yours.
Amazing. Okay, man, but before I start on this though, I just want to say I'd really appreciate the open format you're giving to youngsters like me to share our stories and share this new India that you talk about in your show notes. So it all starts in a jungle called Dandeli, right? I grew up in the forest, and this forest sounds, and whenever I think back, there's this melodious flute that always plays in my head. And so, Milind, I grew up like a real-life Mowgli, running around trees, barefoot, chaddis, and just a very fun, innocent childhood that was very connected to nature, okay? So this nature theme is an important one that we will come back to at the end of the tale. So that's how it started, right? And from there, at the age of 7, I moved to Bangalore. And in Bangalore, I came for schooling. And I actually moved to a suburb called Jakkur, which I think you're familiar with. Is that right? You know this area?
Absolutely. I mean, a very dear friend of ours, he parks his microlight at the Jakkur airport and gives fun ride to people on the weekends.
Yes, you won't believe it, Milind. As I look out of my window, I'm looking at the Jakkur aerodrome where they park all the microlights. So what a small world. That's really cool. So when I think to my years in Bangalore, which was years 7 to 14, early schooling, one sound that keeps coming to mind is actually not the flight that's right next to me, but I'm right next to Yelahanka crossing. So there's this train that keeps going through, and it's almost punctuated my childhood and our conversations in our home, especially this honk. And then the train. So I've always had this background of the sound of the Indian train, this feeling of movement. And even growing up in Dandeli, lots of train rides between Bangalore and Dandeli. We used to do that more than fly. So the Indian train has been a big part of my childhood, and it'll reflect in the music that I might play later on, right? So anyway, skipping ahead, I went to Kodaikanal for school. So at 14, in a way, I feel like my nomadic journey started at 14 because I moved out of the house, went to boarding school. And what you're hearing, if you listen closely at the back, is my friends and me laughing at 16. And it was a time of just people from all over the world getting to know each other, a real sense of acceptance and tolerance for differences and celebrating differences, and a real happy time in my life. And as I said, looking back, it was my first taste of like international community living, right? Now, pivoting to my story with audio, how the audio comes in the Nomad. One of the things that happened at this school is that I discovered this app called Virtual DJ. It's a computer app, a free app, and it's my introduction to the world of sound and music. Now, for most people, maybe the introduction was picking up a guitar or a piano or playing the drums for the first time. Maybe it's a sign of my generation and how big a part technology is in my generation. But for me, it was this app called Virtual DJ. And what you could do is take existing music, mix with it, like actually experience an audio signal on headphones, play with an equalizer, loop it, add reverb, all of these things that were foreign to me, but it just became like a fun pastime. So, Milind, one thing that happened at this time is I realized a pattern in music. I realized that any sound around us is actually music if it's repeated, or in other words, if it's organized in a certain way. So in my holidays in boarding school, I would go to Mumbai, which is a second home for me. And I'll play you a sound, Milind. Tell me if you heard the sound before.
Agla station, Lower Parel.
I'll play it again.
Agla station, Lower Parel.
Do you know the sound?
Diveakssh, I have grown up in Dadar, Mumbai.
In Bombay.
And Dadar station is something which, one has spent, countless hours. And yes,
right.
Agla station, Lower Parel, Agla station, Matunga is something which one is so familiar with.
You know the sound.
And also,
well,
let me say,
what I want to tell you, Milind.
Yeah, let me also say
please.
that, you talked about this honking of the train that you heard in Yelahanka as you were growing up. I mean, I did my engineering in the decade of 80s in Bangalore at the Ramaya Institute of Technology. And used to live at this small place called Sanjay Nagar then, which today I'm told is something very big, and there is something called a dollar colony out there. But then it was a time when auto rickshaw fellows would never even dare to come to our place. And from the house that we lived, it was a place called the RMS layout, RMS standing for Railway Mail Service. So these were employees of Indian Railway Mail Service who had taken loan from the railways to build small houses for themselves. And, I used to live in that house, which was on a 30 feet by a 40 feet plot. And far away at a distance, there was this train line which would be just before Yelahanka station. So the honking that you've heard growing up is something which I would have probably heard over my 4 years of living there in the 80s. That's a good connection there.
That's so cool to think that we're from, different generations, but we're connected by those same sounds, that it actually brings familiarity for you and for me is pretty cool. It's the power of sound. So this sound, what started to happen to me after I learned a little bit of DJing and I started to notice patterns in music is that any sound repeated is music. In other words, music is simply organized sound.
Agla station, Lower Parel. Agla station, Dadar. Agla station, Lower Parel. Lower Parel. Agla station, Dadar. Agla station, Mahalakshmi. 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 Agla
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Oh, thank you. So, full disclosure, I didn't make that backing track. The essence of DJing is having a ear for sounds that exist or music that exists and combining them in a unique way or transitioning between them in a unique way. So, it's an art form that I started to understand and really appreciate because it's about the art of listening, right? From there, I actually moved at that point, at 16 years old, I moved to Brisbane with dreams of being an actor. At the time, that's what I thought I wanted to do. So I had this opportunity. I went to an art school in Brisbane in Australia. And I thought this DJing or fascination for sound was simply a hobby on the side, right? But when I think back to Australia, I want to play you one sound that reminds me of my time there. There's a sound that they have to help the blind cross the road. And it sounds like this. That beep, okay? So that beep is when you press the button to cross the road, they play that beep. And that means wait. It's a very functional sound design. I like it. So it means wait. But if you keep listening, wait, and then cross. So anyway, I wanted to share that because when I think back to Australia, I think back to that sound. So what happened is I started to get a little disillusioned with acting. I realized it's not for me. And I started to get more and more fascinated by the sounds around me. And through theater in that school, I found sound design. You know, the act of making something for an other piece of work, such as designing sound for theater or for film, okay? And so I started to go to university and learn a little bit about how, instead of DJing, how to actually produce music, how to produce my own sound. So what I want to play for you next, Milind, is my first ever piece of university homework. My first sound I ever created. And of course, I was dying to sample that cross the road sound. So this is like my first ever sound I exported. So this shows you like the journey of my audio nomading, right? So that's the sound of the intersection. So what started to happen is a fascination for sampling, for applying sound in different ways, for kind of expanding my mind about what sound can do. And that led to completely moving away from acting and instead freelancing as a sound designer. I started to get tapped by my friends, and we made a small theater company and stuff like that in university days. And I would design original sound for film and theater. And it gave me a lot of joy. And one interesting thing is I was able to actually make music without knowing any music theory, just with what I'd learned from DJing, listening, and production, and a lot of trial, error, and experimenting. If a director came to me with a story, I was able to make music by that deadline, and they were pleased with it, and the audience was happy. What you're hearing now is, an example of the music I used to make for theater, these kind of dreamy soundscapes. But Milind, I was never able to make music for me. The music from my heart or for my soul. If I would ever sit down and say like, today I want to make a dance music track, or today I want to make a hip hop track or whatever, I was never able to make it. But I was able to make it for other people for university, no problem. So that's an interesting observation I want to share. From here, I'm going to muffle the sound down slowly, filter it out, because the next part is for 5 years, there was silence. I didn't work on music for 5 years because I took an opportunity to work with Uber. That company had just launched in Australia, and I kind of just randomly emailed them asking if I can work for them, and it turned into a 5-year career where I consciously decided to grow operationally and in a business way, and I'm really glad I did it. It was a great experience. But there's no music for this section because there was no, I was consciously like not able to make music while I had a full-time job that was quite demanding.
And
one thing that happened here.
Which year was that?
So this is when I was about 20 years old, so about 7 years ago, 2014. Yeah, Uber was launching in Australia and New Zealand, and I went ahead and joined them. And you touched upon it earlier about me being a fellow podcaster. One cool thing that happened in that role is while I grew with them and joined the operations team working in like community engagement, an idea that I had along with my team was that a lot of drivers are from Indian origin and they're reading these long emails in English. What if we could give them a podcast instead? And this is when podcast was still relatively new, right? And so I was able to marry my passion for sound and knowledge in sound with a real business need. And for 2 years, I ran, hosted, edited, and ran this podcast project for Uber, which gave me a lot of satisfaction because, as I said, I was able to marry both my worlds, right? One thing that came out of that is I was actually nominated. The work was nominated for an Australian podcast award, which felt really cool. So I'm not sharing this part to flex or to show off. The reason I'm sharing it is because I want to help anyone else facing this. Is when you're on your first job, and Milind, I'm sure you might have experienced this in your first job as well, maybe, you feel like your sense of self-worth and validation purely comes from your performance at work, right? How the feedback your manager gives you, the title underneath your name when you sign off on that email, right? How you're doing compared to your peers. But something about this nomination from the outside world for my work, which I just kind of sneakily applied our Uber podcast into this podcast nomination. I didn't really run it by the company, and we were lucky to get nominated, and it was all good. Something about this told me that, like, hey, you know what? I actually can do a lot of things independently. They have a lot of value that I'm giving to another company, but you're able to turn that value and shine that light into yourself and do something for yourself as well. Do you know? Like this kind of entrepreneurial thought. So I think that, coupled with after 5 years of working there and them becoming a bigger company, something changed and I started to get a little disillusioned with work. So I come back to Bangalore one day after 5 years of Uber. I'm like, 25 years old? And I'm just sitting in my guest room, which is my room in the house. And I just had this sudden moment of clarity, this kind of spiritual awakening, where I just thought to myself, like, what am I doing? For 5 years, I've worked at this company. I know my passion is sound. If you've heard everything I've said in the last 10 minutes, it's all been to do with sound and music. That's clearly what my path is. Why am I still working that job? So in that moment of clarity, I took a lot of decisions. I decided I'm going to chase my love for music by learning how to produce music properly, doing the right course, quitting my job, also chasing this love for travel that I had suppressed, because 10 years I'd been in Australia. I did the usual school, university, job. I moved cities from Brisbane to Sydney with my job, but my friends were telling me how they went to Japan for the weekend, or, this one crazy guy, Aaron, told me how he went to like Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan and did a bike trip. And every time someone else said it, there was this like deep feeling in me that I really want to wander and I really want to see life outside of these four walls. So that's what I did. I went back to Sydney and I took a bunch of aggressive almost decisions about just changing my life and following this calling. It was pretty scary, I'm not gonna lie. It was a really tough time, but there were a lot of blessings in disguise. For example, I was made redundant from my job. I was about to quit, but because of COVID, they had to lay off about 20% of their workforce and my job was impacted. So I got paid to quit. That's one blessing that came out of it, And so I had this time and a little bit of money to actually just sit and meditate and do nothing for a while, Answer the question, tu kaun hai? Like, who are you? Before going ahead and making the music that's stuck inside me, I feel like you need to do a bit of self-exploration and me time. So what happened in this time is I went for a walk on the beach and I see this girl parked in her van, like a camper van. This is now where the audio is meeting the Nomad, as you can tell.
This is in Sydney, right?
So I actually came back to Brisbane in the pandemic. Sorry about that. I came back to Brisbane. I was made free of my job. I got some money and I was just chilling and I took a little spontaneous trip to the beach. I was just decided to just not do nothing for a while before I jump into my next adventure. Cool off. And I'm walking on the beach and I see this girl, her name is Marianne, shout out if you're listening. And she's just chilling by the beach in her van with her computer, and what an expansive view of the ocean. Much better than the view I'm getting from my hostel that I've paid good money for. And I ask her, what are you doing? And she says, I live in my van. I'm a van lifer. It's the first time I heard that phrase. I said, how are you charging a computer? And she pointed to her solar panel. And I was like, wow, that's a thing. I did not know that was a thing. And I said, what are you doing on your computer? And she's working a job for America, for the States. She's a writer from the back of a van in Australia, keeping her expenses low. And this was a deeper moment of clarity. Like, if I want to study music production online or make this music, why do I need to do it from an apartment? Why can't I do it from a van? So I'll just pause there. I'm curious. I want to ask you, like, I don't know, coming from a previous time when these thoughts or aspirations were not even possible, what do you think about this? Like, if you could live life again, would you live life in a camper van for a little bit?
Yes and no, both. Because yes, I mean, what I just heard over the last couple of minutes from you is like a movie, as if it's not real, because the age and stage in life, and I was growing up in my mid-20s. It was a very, very, very different world, very, very different India. And of course, over the last 30, 40 years, significant development has happened in terms of technology, which allows you to do what you are wishing to do. For example, Marianne, that you just said, this new friend of yours sitting on the beaches of Brisbane, charging her electronic devices with a solar panel and working as a writer for somebody online, for somebody in the US. So a lot of things have become kind of commoditized in terms of its availability, right? I mean, in terms of affordable and extremely powerful laptop, technology to charge it through a solar panel and a battery, all fixed in a camper van and probably a 4G mobile network which operates on the beaches of Brisbane, connecting her to the world and letting her do what she wants to do. So I think it's a different world we have all transitioned into. Obviously, in many ways, I look at it as positive because, for example, this very conversation of this podcast that we are having would not have been possible without technology. We are talking on Zoom right now. And you sitting in your room in Bangalore, which interestingly, you said a moment ago, and I want to pick on that if you don't mind, Diveakssh, is you said that after 5 years of Uber, you came back home, you came back to Bangalore and was staying
Brisbane.
I think after Uber, I think
sorry, that's right. I came back to Bangalore when I had like my moment of clarity on a holiday.
Bangalore, and you were staying in your guest room. And then you said it was my room.
Interesting that you picked up on that.
Because that essentially, gives me a glimpse that for somebody who comes back home and calls his room as a guest room, essentially is trying to say that I'm not here for long.
I love that you picked up on this. That is fascinating. The real reason, as much as I just want to leave it at that, the real reason is because my brother and I grew up sharing a room. My dad really believes, and my mom really believes in like us learning tolerance and, growing that relationship of sibling. But now that we're grown up, he used to take the kids' room, which is my room, our room, and I used to take the guest room. So we all get a little bit of space. But that's a lovely pickup and very accurate.
Again, sticking to the new India that we just spoke about, because in many ways, what happens or happened to the Marians of Brisbane in Australia happens to many, many Indians today. It's one country where 4G internet is available everywhere. I mean, just early in the year, Asha and I were in a place called Bir Billing in Himachal Pradesh, trying to have a first go on for paragliding, and we were amongst the hills, with a 4G internet on our iPhone. So I think as a country also, it's a huge leap that has happened in terms of opportunities, and as you very rightly said, for the curious and the creative, the courageous and the adventurous, the sky is the limit. So would love to pick your brains on the new India that you feel and you are a part of, and a generation which is actually making this new India happen?
Definitely. So actually, the story that I'm sharing actually leads into the new India. It ends at the new India. So let me continue with the van story, if it's okay with you, and then I will actually show you sounds and stories of new India, because I'm very passionate about that topic as well. So after I bought this camper van, one thing I want to do is actually want to introduce you to Spoons, my camper van. Now, listeners might be thinking, we're on a podcast, how are you going to show us a video of a van? But so much can happen with just sound. So this is the ignition, doors, and engine of my van, Spoons. Classic Spoons. So I don't know if it was as exciting for you as it is for me, but that is a 36-year-old tin box that was empty that I built into my music studio home and took on the road. So as I was saying, I went on this adventure to unlock the music inside me, right? So what this did for me is it reminded me that I was able to make music earlier for directors or film projects because there was a story to tell. But whenever I sat down to make music, I was just trying to make a dance music track or a hip hop track, and there was no story. So as I embarked on this journey in the van, I decided that I'm not going to try to make an album. I'm instead going to try to tell stories. And the output of that will be an album, but it really needs to be led by the story first, right? So then I started on this journey, and it was beautiful. I met people from all over the world. You're hearing some laughter at the hostel when people from all over the world. And I was doing my online course while I was kind of in the back of this van. And what this led to is this time in isolation where I lived for 6 weeks alone by the side of a lake, and I wrote that debut album, Moments of Clarity. Right? So this really is where the audio met the Nomad, and I managed to live in nature, fulfill that dream or desire from the moment of clarity back in Bangalore, and start to write music that really was based on stories and meant something for me. After a year in the van, it was Feb of 2021, the borders looked like they were finally opening. I hadn't seen my family in a long time, and I decided to sell the van and surprise my parents by coming back to India.
Surprise!
They had no idea.
Surprise!
They were just sitting at home. That's me, my mom, and my dad. There's a lot of shock and emotions because for 2.5 years we had not seen each other. That's the price you pay, I guess, as a traveler, and because of COVID. So this was one of my most heartwarming memories, surprising my parents, coming back from Australia. And I had a calling to spend family time, take a break, and then travel India while I mix and master my album.
Diveakssh, at 14, you left home to go to Kodaikanal.
That's right.
And then you had a long journey then on, traveling on the road. A decade in Australia, doing all kinds of things, which you just said a little while ago. And after living on the camper van in Australia for a year and everything, you come back home. So how would you describe, let's say in few words, the 14-year-old Diveakssh who left home for the first time and the 25, 26-year-old who came back? If you can.
Sure. Definitely. I think one of the biggest feelings that I have to share about coming back, especially after the year of living in a van, which was as beautiful as it was tough, it was challenging. You have to fend for yourself. Your van is breaking down all the time and it takes a lot of grit. So to come back and just feel that sense of being cared for by my family felt really like a warm hug that I'd been waiting to have, But otherwise, the 14-year-old and 6-year-old, I would like to think there's not much difference. We're both curious, playful people that live in the moment, and I think I'm still very much in touch with my inner child. But I guess the difference is I feel like I've seen so much more, learned so much more, learned to listen on this podcast, I'm doing a lot of talking, but otherwise, I really love to get others to speak and learn to listen. That's a core skill that I've learned from my travels and just meeting people from all over the world. So that's a little bit of a summary. It's a very good question.
So, Diveakssh, here you are, all of 26, coming back home to India after a wonderful 10-year adventurous journey in Australia, of which almost a year has been on the camper van. What happened to the Nomad then?
Okay, so the thing about a nomad is that they can't stay grounded for too long. Adventure keeps calling. So after about a month or two at home and some really beautiful, much needed family time for both my family and myself, I ordered a backpack and it arrived on Amazon. And I worked out how can I fit my music studio into a backpack if I've already fitted into a camper van. So I'm a really serious minimalist, right? So I went, okay, if I can just live off, maybe 4 t-shirts, 2 pants, 5 chaddis, and that's all I need, then maybe I have enough space to take my music gear because that's my priority. And that's what I did. And I put on a backpack and I went out mainly to Himachal Pradesh and Ladakh is where I spend most of my time. And the aim for me was to mix and master the music I wrote in that camper van, which is a technical process you need to do to the sound, which I didn't know. So I've been learning as I've been doing it. It's my first time making kind of music for myself. So mix, master, and release the music while I explore these beautiful landscapes. So I had a fantastic year. And one thing I want to show you is, I really experienced a new India. Because what you're hearing right now is the tumba being played outside my hostel, okay, by an old Baba. But the hostel is full of people from all over the world and all over India. So what I saw consciously was the meeting of old with new. The meeting of East and West, right? In a very kind of global and enhanced way. I saw a bunch of Indian origin people making money with jobs online, like digital nomad style, right? Even if you look at me, I consider India as my roots, Australia as my new home, and the world as one big instrument to explore, right? I think I want to live a nomadic life. I want to live a life on the road. Also, marriage and kids and settling down is not really like a goal for me. If it happens, great. But it's not like by 30, I want 2 kids. And everything I'm sharing is not uncommon. I met so many people that share a similar approach to life, of taking some things from their tradition and values. Some people are even collaborating with the old to update them and make them more relevant. For example, I have a friend called Kavisha, who's a textile designer in Himachal Pradesh. She's working with old artisans and updating their designs so that they sell for a much higher retail value than the old designs. So there's a lot of this beautiful collaboration happening, and so I just want to confirm to you that this new India is definitely real.
Wonderful, wonderful. With this wonderful ride, and I'm sure, whilst we are having this conversation with you, you are in Bangalore right now, but I'm sure you'll hit the road soon because that seems to be a home. Where does the audio nomad go from here?
That's a good question, man. So, look, something that's been happening to me is that my direction or what I should do next comes to me in dreams, right? And these dreams they've tended to become clearer ever since I became a traveler, because you get this like traveler instinct that kind of tells you what to do. So my most recent dream that I had only 2 weeks ago, it told me to create a sonic exhibition of sorts. I want to make an exhibition that really demonstrates to the audience or the attendees the power of sound, okay? So it'll have different rooms, one dedicated to a science of visualizing sound called cymatics that shows you that the whole world's, the universe's blueprint can be seen in sound and the designs that come out when you visualize sound. There'll be another room dedicated to field recording, which is this art I've kind of showed today on this podcast of recording sounds around you and reliving experiences or transporting to different places with the art of good quality recording. There'll also be a room dedicated to listening and one to audio storytelling, which is my album. So I have a calling to do this in Mumbai, and that's my mission on what I want to do next year. This is actually the first time I'm vocalizing it. From here, I'm going to go to Dandeli, back home in a week or two, finish the last track on the album and kick back and have a good celebration with family and friends. And then next year, I'll start on this direction that I just shared.
Can we hear one of your creations from this album? That would be
Okay.
awesome way to kind of bring this podcast conversation to the end.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you again for giving me a platform here to speak on. And the track that I've chosen to share actually brings together a lot of the sounds you've already heard. So listen out for the flute that reminds me of Dandeli, the sound of crossing the road, the train sounds from India, and all of the drums are sounds of my van, my camper van, via my field recordings. So without further ado, this one's called Platform 1. It's the first song on the album, Moments of Clarity, and it's a song about my childhood.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Diveakssh, you are leaving me speechless right now. And I consider this piece of music that you have just played for us on this podcast as a gift that you're leaving with us.
Absolutely, it is.
And what an honor and a joy it is for us to receive this gift. And if you allow me, I have a return gift for you.
Oh, okay. What's the return gift?
So the return gift is actually a set of lines that I came across yesterday, very randomly by chance. And for some reasons, I kind of kept it for you as a part of this recording to offer you back as a return gift. So if you allow me, I'll read these lines for you.
That's so kind of you. Please go ahead.
Here it goes. I woke up early, much before sunrise, and boarded the first bus to take me away from the city, away from the noise and all its people. I was alone on the bus and had no idea where I was going. 2 hours later, I arrived in a small hillside town, which was the last stop for the bus. It was one of those towns with one single coffee shop, a town where everyone knows each other. I walked for a while until I found a small river gently flowing down the slopes. There I sat and stayed the whole day with nothing and everything on my mind, just cleaning my head. And then just around sunset, for a brief moment, I heard that most beautiful sound. I sat there contemplating the sound I heard. Don't know how long that was. The stillness of the night was interrupted by the bus I could see from a distance, waiting to bring me back home.
Wow. That is so accurate. You could not have found something more perfect. Thank you so much for that gift. I'm going to listen back to the recording to just that bit again and again. Thank you, Milind. Who wrote that?
Don't ask me.
Did you write that?
It's a gift. Enjoy the gift.
Oh my gosh, that hits twice as hard. That's a beautiful image. Wow.
This conversation, Diveakssh, has also reminded me of this beautiful movie, which probably would have seen, called Nomad.
I love that movie.
Yeah?
So much.
And,
yes, I saw it when I was living in the van with another
yes.
traveler. It was very special.
There's a beautiful line in that movie which actually I'm reminded of as a part of this conversation, because honestly I don't want to say a goodbye to you right now. And the lines from Nomadland, which resonates with me at this point in time, here and now, says, "Goodbyes are not final in the Nomad community, as its members always promise to see each other again down the road." So as a fellow nomad, let me not bid you goodbye, Diveakssh, and rather say, see you down the road.
See you down the road, Milind. So on that note, Milind, thank you for having me on your podcast. And I'm sure that I'll see you and Asha down the road.
Absolutely. It could be Dandeli, it could be somewhere in Himachal, I don't know where. And for all you know, it could even be at your exhibition that you're planning sometime next year in Mumbai city, your debut exhibition of your music.
That's right.
So look forward to being there with you. Wonderful. Enjoyed every moment of this conversation. Just a quick word, your takeaways from what we've just had.
My takeaway is a big sense of gratitude, my friend. Thank you.
And a dil se, big thank you to you. And as they say at the end of the Star Wars movies, may the force be with you.
May the force be with you, Milind.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Wait, one sec. May the force be with you.
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one. Great. Ciao. Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Catch you. Thanks, Milind.
Thank you for your time today, my dear listeners. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri, signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as a piece of any professional advice. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of its guest. Creators of this podcast expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct or indirect, consequential or other damages arising out of any individual's use of this podcast. For feedback and suggestions, please write to wingsindia75@gmail.com. Thank you.